Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to my video on using conditional formatting in Microsoft Excel. Oftentimes in counseling research, when we collect data or we're given data to analyze, it's useful to use conditional formatting to have Excel highlight or mark cells in a dependent variable, such as this, that fall within a specified range or outside of a specified range. And the conditional formatting feature, which is up here on the ribbon under the Home ribbon, gives us that ability. So I have here 17 records and 6 dependent variables. I'm going to show you various aspects of the conditional formatting feature in Excel. So let's start with the first dependent variable. And these dependent variables can really be any type of data. So let's say for this first example, this is a depression inventory, and a higher score indicates fewer depressive symptoms or less severity, and a lower score indicates more depressive symptoms and increased severity. And we want to mark this data using conditional formatting in a way that makes it easier to interpret, and so we can interpret more quickly. So we go to conditional formatting and we see that there's several different options available. Let's look at the highlight cells rule. So you can see that you have option of greater than, and you can specify value, less than, between, equal to, text that contains, and of course that wouldn't apply here because we're using numbers, and a date occurring, and of course that doesn't apply here. You can also look for duplicate values. But let's look at less than, and let's say that we're concerned in this particular dependent variable with any value that's below 35. So we indicate that in this range, and let's make it green fill with green text. And you can see that every value below 35 in this data set with 17 records was highlighted in green. So this is useful for being able to quickly look at the data and assess which participants fell in a range where you're worried about their score, where it's low and they need attention immediately, as opposed to the other scores where a different treatment protocol could be followed. So moving on to the second dependent variable, let's take a look at the top and bottom rules. So what this will do is this will give you top 10 items, top and bottom, or top 10 items, bottom 10 items, then top and bottom 10%, and also above average and below average. So again, using the same logic, and say we're using some sort of symptom inventory, let's go with below average. Let's mark that with a light red fill. Now you can see there's 6 options to choose from here, including a red border, but you can also customize your format. So there's really a lot of options available. But let's go with a light red fill. And you can see these were all of the participants that scored below average. Moving on to the third dependent variable we have here. Remember, you need to highlight the whole range before you go up to select conditional formatting. Let's look at the data bars. Now, this would be more appropriate if we're looking at, say, test scores. So let's say these are participants that took an aptitude test, and we want to see how they did, and we want some help from these data bars just to get an idea visually. So we'll go with yellow here, and again there's a lot of different selections. You have gradient fill as well as solid fill. So let's go with the gradient fill yellow. And again, it just makes it a little easier because you can look right over and see that clearly this was the highest score at 79, and 21 in 2 occasions here. On 2 occasions, that was the lowest score. Now let's look at dependent variable number 4. Look at the color scales. So the color scales will highlight, oh, I had to select the whole range, so I didn't do that. So the color scales will give you kind of a high, medium, and low, and it's gradient, it fades. And you can see that the green indicates the higher score, like the dark green, and then the light green a little bit lower, then you have the yellow, and then the orange, and then at the very bottom is the red. Now this can be specified. So if you go into conditional formatting, and you want to manage this rule, and I'll delete the one that I accidentally entered in there, you can see that you can edit this rule and you can change these colors. So instead of red being the lowest and then yellow and green, we could make it like a dark gray and then a little bit lighter gray and then say very light gray. We could also change what the lowest value would be. We can specify that. Instead of having it the minimum be the lowest value, you could specify a lowest value. So we could make this a number and simply type in what we want the lowest value to be in this array. And then we have percentile for midpoint. We could also specify a specific number. For example, I'll just use 50. And then same thing with the highest value. We can specify that or leave it as highest value and hit OK. Apply that rule. And you can see for this array now it's in gray. So taking a look at dependent variable 5. Now we're going to move to icon sets. This is a pretty interesting ability in Excel. It has a lot of different applications. Let's say that this is, again, we'll go with an aptitude test, and either it's pass or fail. So we look at the different options and we see this icon set has a check mark. And again, let me highlight the whole range. It has a check mark and an exclamation point that's yellow, and then a red X. So you might be thinking, well, this is okay, but really you just want the check mark and the X. So it's pass or fail. You don't really need like the warning level, which would be the exclamation point. So go in and manage this rule, or manage rules and edit. And let's say that, let's move away from percent. Let's move to number for both of these. Let's say anything below, in this particular test, anything below a 40 is failing. So I actually want to put that up here, 40. And then this will be 0. We'll set this icon to no cell icon and change this one to, let's make it, instead of the red X here, let's make it the red X, the white X in a red circle. All right. And we'll apply this rule. And you can see that's fairly straightforward. You can see who passed and who failed without having to look at the actual number. But the icon will tell us. Additionally, if we go into this and edit this rule, we can show the icon only and apply that. And that's very direct. You either have a check mark or the red X, and the numbers aren't visible. This is more useful for reporting. Obviously, we'd want to have the numbers for any type of further analysis. So there's another feature I want to show you with the icon sets, and that is that I already said you can mix and match them, but they go up to 5 different levels. So let's select one that has 5 levels, and let's go with a percent. By default, it's 80, 60, 40, and below 20. But we want to move away from the system they used and want to kind of stick with the green, red, and yellow system. So let's say the highest would be this green arrow. And the next would be a green circle. And then we have a yellow circle. and then we'll have two levels of red. We'll have a red circle, and then the red down arrow. That's like, that would be the lowest scores. All right, and then we hit OK and click Apply, and you can see we have 5 different levels available to demonstrate the score and kind of what it means in this range. So you might be looking at all these different conditional formatting styles and wondering if you can just custom build your own, and that's what I'm going to do in for this dependent variable 6. You don't need to use the highlight cell rules, the top bottom rules, the data bars, the color scales, or the icon sets. You can create a new rule from scratch. It gives you a lot of different options. We're going to go to format cell only cells that contain rule. So let's say we want to look at, we'll base this on the cell value, and we'll say if it's greater than, let's say 85, we're going to format it, and again there's a lot of different formatting options. But let's make that a green background. Hit OK, and you can see that it applied the green background to the cells that contain a value greater than 85. Now this is an interesting ability of Excel, is you can stack rules. So you can have that rule and then another rule. We have a cell value between, let's say, 75 and 84. Let's say I want to format that as a yellow background. Click OK. And you can see that nothing changed, and that's because no value fell within that range. So I'm going to change a value just for the purposes of demonstrating. You see it's yellow, and I'll change this 72, 79. You see that's yellow. So we have now 2 rules that are stacked, and you can continue stacking rules based on the needs you have. So that was 75 through 84, so we can make this anything less than 75. And we'll format this in red. And you can see that now all the values have a color assignment to them. And this is 3 levels. This is the red, yellow, green, but you can have many more levels than that depending on what you're trying to do with the conditional formatting. Now I'm going to leave all these conditional formats in place as I show you another feature in the conditional formatting ability in Excel that allows you to make changes to, say, the ID based on the values in the dependent variables. So first we'll highlight the 17 values in ID. Then we'll go to conditional formatting. We'll create a new rule. And we're going to select use a formula to determine which cells to format. You can see that we enter the format in here, or the formula in here. And let's say that we're going to use the first 3 dependent variables. And let's say they all measure the same thing. Let's say they all measure the severity of depressive symptoms. And we want to be alerted when any one of those values falls below, let's say, 35. So the formula we're going to use is going to start with OR. And then we're going to have 3 criteria in that OR function. So even though this conditional formatting is going to apply to all the 17 participants, we're going to select the top value. So that would be cell B2. And you can see that it puts the $sign in, which makes it absolute. We're going to delete the $sign in front of the 2. So let's say when B2 is less than 35, or, and we'll go to C2, and again, we'll delete the absolute value, $sign. We'll say this is less than 35. And then similarly for D2, we'll say less than 35. Now you can make these values whatever you want. It could be that the dependent variables are different. Like these, for example, could be t-scores, but they could be on different levels of measurement and not necessarily the same type of score, like the same type of standard score. You could change these values. You could have dependent variable 3, the threshold could be 40, but I'm just going to leave them all at 35. And I'm going to format this in an orange background. Now remember, this is applying to the ID, so it's not going to affect how the dependent variables look visually. So you can see using the OR function that all the ones in orange have at least one value, at least one, that's below 35. So if we were to change this value, for instance, and make it 36, and this value make it 40, now this particular participant wouldn't fall in that kind of high risk scoring we were worried about, where everything was, or at least one score was below 35. So what if the way that this particular these particular instruments were designed and scored and interpreted really meant that all 3 values have to be low for a participant to be at high risk? Well, we'd select this range, and we're going to manage rules and edit this rule. If all 3 need to be below 35, we would change the OR to an AND. Apply that, and now you can see only one participant, the one with the ID number 1004, has all 3 that are below 35. I hope this video on conditional formatting using Excel was helpful to you. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to assist you.